He swept the same hallway every morning, head down, steps measured, invisible, to the students. He was just Mr. Ben, the old janitor who smiled too much and spoke too little. Some mocked his slow pace, others ignored him entirely. But when chaos erupted, an armed intruder storming the school, Ben didn't run. He stepped forward, calm, still, and when the SWAT team arrived, they found the suspect already restrained, Ben's mop cast aside, the man disarmed with surgical precision. Only then did someone notice the Navy SEAL tattoo hidden beneath Ben's rolled-up sleeve. Introduce characters, cultural setting, values, and stakes, rooted in realism but engaging. Maple Ridge High School sat at the edge of a quiet, working-class neighborhood, a brick building nestled between a faded baseball field and an aging row of maple trees that burst orange every October. Inside its halls, life carried a routine rhythm. Bells rang, lockers slammed, students drifted from class to class in loose knots of laughter, gossip, and teenage exhaustion. And somewhere in the background, often unseen and unacknowledged, was Mr. Ben. Officially, his name was Benjamin Cole. Unofficially, he was just the janitor. Mid-60s, tall but slow-moving, with a slight limp and a gray beard that always looked freshly trimmed. Ben had become a quiet fixture in the school over the past 4 years. He arrived before the teachers and often left after the night staff. His uniform, navy blue, with his name stitched over the chest, was always clean. His mop always perfectly rinsed, and his cart of supplies arranged with near-military precision. But no one asked about that. To the students, Ben was background, noise, a benign presence, a punchline even. Some of the kids liked him. He was kind, never raised his voice, and always helped when someone dropped their lunch tray. But most didn't think about him at all. To them, he had no story, except for Liam. Liam Torres was a senior, quiet, observant, the kind of student who didn't say much but missed nothing. He volunteered in the library and helped run the school's AV equipment, which meant he often arrived early, and every morning, without fail. He saw Ben already sweeping the front lobby or wiping down the entryway glass. One morning, Liam offered a shy good morning, and Ben responded with a polite nod and a soft, "Same to you, son." From then on, they exchanged quiet greetings almost daily. Sometimes Liam lingered. He noticed that Ben's cart was always in the same order, that his tools were never out of place. Once, when the school hosted a community safety drill, Liam overheard a teacher joke that Ben could probably organize the whole emergency better than the actual coordinator. Ben had just smiled and kept sweeping. Despite the jokes, the quiet man commanded a kind of subtle respect, though no one seemed to understand why. He never drew attention, never raised his voice, but his eyes, steady, clear, always scanning, seemed to know more than they let on. The teachers liked him. Ms. Caldwell in the math department brought him homemade coffee cake once a week. Mr. Granger, the gym teacher, sometimes asked for help fixing jammed lockers. Ben always obliged, never asking for thanks, but it was principle. Dawson, who appreciated him most. "Ben's a ghost," he told the new school secretary once. "The good kind. Things just work better when he's around." Still, no one knew much about him. Rumors existed, of course. Some said he was a retired mechanic. Others thought he used to run a hardware store. One theory floated around that he'd once worked in city sanitation and had just never stopped cleaning. But Ben never confirmed anything. He spoke when spoken to, kept to himself, and never shared a thing beyond polite smiles and practical advice. The school itself was safe. Maple Ridge didn't have much crime. The most serious incident the previous year was a food fight in the cafeteria that required extra mopping. There were the usual drills, lockdowns, evacuations, but most students treated them like a joke. Even the staff had grown complacent. "We're in the suburbs," one teacher said. "What's the worst that could happen?" That attitude hung in the air like humidity, heavy, invisible, and dangerous, because just outside the school gates, beyond the trees, the baseball field, and the safety drills that no one took seriously, a storm was quietly brewing. Elsewhere in the city, a troubled man had walked into a convenience store with a concealed weapon. No shots were fired. He left with nothing Police took a report, filed it away. But the man didn't vanish. He just waited, planned, looked for somewhere bigger, somewhere softer, somewhere unsuspecting. Back in school, the usual routines continued. Students prepped for exams. Teachers tried to motivate them. Ben scrubbed the gym floor with the same focus he applied every day. No one noticed he was listening to the intercom more than usual, that he parked his cart closer to exits, that his eyes, beneath the calm exterior, had started watching not just for spills but for patterns, for risk. Liam noticed. One morning, he found Ben standing perfectly still outside the science wing, hands folded over his mop handle, staring at a malfunctioning side door that hadn't latched properly. "You okay, Mr. Ben?" he asked. Ben nodded, expression unreadable, just keeping things in place. Liam hesitated, sensing something heavier in his tone. "You ever work security or something?" Ben's eyes held his for a moment too. Long, once, and that was it. No more questions, no more answers. But the seed had been planted. Escalate a moral dilemma, injustice, or misunderstanding. Focus on relatable social or ethical struggles that resonate with German viewers, e.g., fairness, community, work ethic. It happened on a Wednesday, late morning, history class third period. The halls were quiet. A few students lingered outside. The nurse's office. Liam was in the library, cataloging a crate of donated books. Mr. Granger was coaching PE in the gym, and Principal Dawson was off campus at a district meeting. Ben had just finished mopping the east stairwell. He returned to his cart and paused, not because of a spill, but because something felt wrong, the kind of wrong you don't see, you sense. The side door near the loading dock clicked. He had oiled that hinge last week. It shouldn't make a sound. The handle turned slowly, deliberately. Ben stepped back, positioned himself in the corridor, and pretended to readjust the mop. The door opened. A man stepped inside, tall, mid-40s, wearing oversized clothes. A baseball cap pulled low. He moved awkwardly. Something bulged beneath his jacket. He didn't look like a parent, or a teacher, or a repairman. He looked angry, uncertain, like someone carrying weight he didn't know how to hold. Ben's heart didn't race. His breathing didn't change. He simply gripped the handle of the mop, stepped casually in front of the stranger, and said, "You need to check in at the main office, sir." The man stopped, startled. His hand twitched beneath the coat, and that was when Ben saw it. The outline of a weapon. "Back off, old man," the stranger growled. Ben didn't. He took one step forward, calm, direct, unflinching. The stranger raised his voice. "I said back off." Ben's eyes narrowed, not in fear, but in recognition. This wasn't just an angry man. This was someone ready to cross a line. Someone who thought power lived in his hands because of the metal he carried. Ben had known men like him before, in uniform, in chaos, and in silence. He'd trained for this exact moment. But here, now, he was just a janitor. No badge, no authority. Just an old man in a blue jumpsuit with a mop. And that was the problem, because down the hall, through to sets of doors, children sat learning about world history, unaware that violence had just stepped across the threshold. The stranger brushed past Ben, muttering something low. Ben followed, slowly, deliberately. Behind the intruder's back, Ben reached into his cart, not for a weapon, but for the nylon strap of the dustpan handle he had reinforced with steel. RODs long ago, for stability. He once joked to Liam. He turned, stepped forward, and the man spun around, gun drawn. Ben's hands went up. Students began exiting classrooms to corridors down. Liam was among them. "Gun!" someone shouted. Chaos exploded. But not Ben. As students scrambled, Liam froze, watching the impossible unfold. Ben moved fast, fluid, mechanical. In a single blur of motion, he pivoted, closed the distance, and brought his elbow into the intruder's wrist before the man could react. The gun clattered to the floor. Ben kicked it under a locker. The man lunged, but Ben was ready. He shifted. His weight, twisted, dropped the intruder with a sweep of his leg and pinned him in a chokehold so precise. It stunned the few teachers who arrived seconds later. By the time the school security officer got there, The intruder was face down, breathing heavily. Unarmed and held steady by a janitor with calm eyes and steady hands, no one spoke, because no one understood. How had the janitor, Mr. Ben, done what trained officers sometimes couldn't? The answer didn't come immediately. In the aftermath, as police secured the building and parents were notified, stories circulated like wildfire. Rumors bloomed. Theories emerged. That guy used to be a cop. No, he was in the Marines. I heard he once trained bodyguards. But when Liam, shaken but unhurt, gave his statement to the school administrator, he added something no one else had noticed. Mr. Ben didn't panic. He was already ready. The staff sat with those words. The next day, an officer from the local precinct came to thank Ben personally. Ben shook his hand politely, just did what needed doing. But it wasn't enough for the school board. They called Ben in for questioning protocol. They said, "Mr. Cole," one member began, "we appreciate your actions, but you used physical force against an armed intruder without proper identification or backup. You acted outside your job description." Ben said nothing at first. Then, "So you would have preferred I waited?" "It's not that," the board member said quickly. "It's just this opens questions about training, liability. You're asking if an unarmed janitor should have waited for someone official," Ben said evenly. While children were in the hall, a long silence followed. "We're not questioning your intent," another board member added. "We're just trying to understand how a janitor subdued a threat without getting hurt." At that, Ben sighed, and for the first time in 4 years, he told the truth. "I served in naval special warfare for 22 years. SEAL Team 5, retired Chief Petty Officer. I've disarmed IEDs in rainstorms, escorted diplomats through war zones, buried friends in sand I'll never see again. And when I came home, I didn't want to train soldiers anymore. I wanted peace, so I took this job, because I thought maybe I could serve differently." The room went still. "I sweep floors now, but I don't forget how to watch, how to protect, or how to stop someone who comes through the wrong door." By the time he left the meeting, the board was silent, but not everyone was. The students began sharing the story online. The headlines came within hours. School janitor revealed. As former Navy SEAL who stopped armed intruder, news vans rolled up outside. Interviews were requested. Ben declined them all. He didn't want a spotlight. He wanted the halls to be safe. Liam, meanwhile, spoke up for him on school radio. In classrooms, even at a city council meeting, he said the words Ben wouldn't. "If someone like Mr. Ben can save lives and still be treated like he doesn't belong, what does that say about how we value people who serve quietly?" And that question stuck. The school board offered Ben a formal Medal of Valor. He accepted it, then folded it quietly into his locker behind his mop, because none of this was about recognition. It was about the lesson the students and the world had almost missed. Dignity doesn't need applause. It needs awareness. Strength isn't what you show. It's what you carry when no one sees. It wasn't the news coverage that changed things, nor the grainy security footage of Ben pinning the intruder to the floor. Not even the headline that labeled him the janitor who saved 312 lives. What changed everything, what truly turned the story from rumor to revelation, was what happened in the school auditorium 2 days later. Principal Dawson had returned to campus shaken, his usual polished confidence dimmed by guilt. He hadn't been there. He hadn't protected his students, and in his absence, someone else had done what he and the whole system had failed to prepare for. That Friday morning, he stood before the students and staff in a hastily assembled assembly. The gym was packed. A buzz rippled through the rows of folding chairs. The lights hummed overhead. Phones were half tucked into pockets, ready to record something unexpected. Ben stood off stage, still in his uniform, still with that old, almost apologetic posture, like a man waiting to be told to leave. He didn't want a stage. He wanted things to return to normal. But normal had changed. Principal Dawson cleared his throat, looked at the crowd, and began. "This week, something unthinkable happened. An armed intruder entered our school. He passed through our defenses, past locked doors, past protocols, past drills, and before our trained responders could arrive, someone stopped him." He paused. No dramatics, just fact. Not a security guard, not law enforcement, a janitor. Every head turned toward Ben, who stood like a shadow behind the curtain. A presence too familiar to feel heroic, too ordinary to match the scale of what he'd done. Dawson continued, voice steady. For years, Benjamin Cole has served this school with humility, patience, and kindness. Most of us never asked who he was, what he had done before. We just saw a man with a mop and keys. We didn't see the protector standing among us. He turned to Ben. Mr. Cole, Ben, would you join us? Ben hesitated, then stepped forward. It wasn't applause that greeted him, not yet. It was silence, heavy, wide-eyed, expectant silence. Students sat up straighter. Teachers leaned forward. Even the ones who used to nod at him half-heartedly now watched with reverence. Ben walked to the center of the stage. He didn't stand tall. He didn't smile. He simply waited for Dawson to step aside. Then he looked at the crowd, and in a voice low and measured, began to speak. I've cleaned these halls for almost 5 years, he said. I've changed light bulbs, unclogged drains, picked up gum, and wiped messages off lockers. Most days, I go unnoticed. And that's fine by me. I didn't come here to be seen. I came here to serve. He paused. Students leaned in. But this week, I did something different. I stopped a man from doing something terrible. I didn't do it because I'm brave. I did it because I've seen what happens when people look away, when they wait for someone else to act. Ben looked out into the crowd, and his eyes landed on Liam sitting in the second row, hands clenched tight in his lap, heart pounding. I used to be someone else. Before this job, I wore a different uniform. I carried weapons. I walked into rooms not knowing if I'd walk out again. I trained to survive so others wouldn't have to. He swallowed. The room was still. I left that life because I wanted peace. But peace isn't something you find. It's something you create every day, with your choices, with your silence, with your presence. Then the twist. I didn't stop the intruder because I'm stronger. I stopped him because I paid attention. I saw the door that didn't close. I saw the twitch in his hand. I saw the threat before it was a headline, and I acted because protecting people doesn't always look like heroism. Sometimes it looks like listening, silence again. But this time, not from awe, from realization. He wasn't telling them he was special. He was telling them they could be. And that shook them more than any headline. Ben turned back to Dawson. I'm grateful for the respect. But if you really want to honor what happened, start seeing the people you don't see. Not just me, everyone. And then he stepped away. It was Liam who stood first. No hesitation, just instinct, a quiet act of gratitude. Then a few more rows, then the whole auditorium. Not a standing ovation for a hero, a standing acknowledgement of the truth they'd missed. Later that day, after the students returned to class, something small happened, something no news outlet reported. A group of juniors from the AV club started a new project. A wall of portraits, not of star athletes or class presidents, but of the quiet staff who kept the school alive. Cafeteria workers, groundskeepers, night security. They left a space in the center blank for Ben, but he refused. If you want to put me anywhere, he said with a tired smile, put me at the bottom, holding everyone else up. The school never went back to how it was. The hallways didn't just feel cleaner. They felt watched, not in fear, in care. And Ben, he kept mopping, kept tightening loose screws, kept showing up before dawn and leaving after everyone else. But now, when he passed through the halls, students nodded. Teachers greeted him with genuine warmth. Liam still met him in the morning, but now others joined. And one day, months later, when a freshman tripped and scattered his books across the floor, it was Simmons' former class clown, now student body VP, who picked them up, helped him up, and said, Mr. Ben says we all keep the halls clean. Not just him. The legend never left the walls of Maple Ridge High. Because Ben didn't leave. He just kept serving. Quietly, life returned to rhythm at Maple Ridge High. The echo of what had happened remained, like a soft hum beneath the daily announcements and the shuffle of backpacks. But it didn't haunt the halls, it matured them. Ben didn't ask for a new title, but the school board gave him one anyway, safety liaison. It came with a slight pay raise, but more importantly, it came with silent respect, no ceremony. Just a new ID badge that read, Mr. Benjamin Cole, Facilities and Safety. When he picked it up, he smiled, not because of pride, but because, for once, the world had labeled him accurately. What changed wasn't dramatic, it was small, accumulative, powerful in its consistency. Students no longer passed by him as though he were part of the wallpaper. They said, "Good morning, Mr. Ben," with sincerity. Some of the younger ones even asked to learn how to mop properly. He taught them, quietly. Without turning it into a lesson, Liam began a mentorship initiative called Unsung, a peer-led club to highlight the overlooked roles in school infrastructure: janitors, cafeteria staff, bus drivers, their first guest, Ben, their second, Rosa, who'd been working the lunch line for 15 years and knew every kid's allergies better than the nurse. The narrative had shifted. No longer was protection synonymous with a badge. No longer was importance measured in visibility. And for the first time, students were learning to look deeper. But the most lasting shift came through Principal Dawson. The guilt he carried after being absent during the incident didn't dissolve with time. Instead, he used it. He initiated a district-wide program on silent watch training skills that taught all staff, not just security, how to observe, respond, and trust their instincts. Ben helped design it. Voluntarily, he never stood at the front. He just sat at the back of training rooms, nodding occasionally, offering a soft correction when someone tried to make it about control instead of care. When a journalist asked Ben 6 months later why he never accepted a media interview, he finally gave an answer. "I didn't want to be the story. I wanted the story to be the reminder." That became a quote on a banner hung in the school commons. Meanwhile, the intruder whose name was rarely spoken was quietly sentenced. Ben never testified publicly. He declined victim status. He did, however, submit a single-page statement to the court. "I don't hate the man who walked into my school. I pity what he believed, that violence makes you seen. I've seen real violence. It leaves nothing behind. What I hope for him now is not punishment but clarity, because fear doesn't make you powerful, and being ignored doesn't mean you're powerless. It means you haven't yet found where you're needed." The judge read it aloud in the courtroom. The intruder lowered his head. Months passed, then a full year. Ben was still at Maple Ridge, still walking those halls, but something had shifted in him, too. He wasn't invisible anymore, and not because people stared, but because they finally saw. They saw that quiet strength wasn't the absence of power, it was the presence of discipline, of grace. One winter morning, Liam brought him a cup of black coffee with 2 sugars and no lid, just how Ben liked it. Ben raised an eyebrow. "Getting good at this," Liam smiled. "Just paying attention." Ben nodded slowly. "That's how it starts." And that became the ethos of the entire school. That's how it starts. Not with speeches or spotlights, but with attention, with awareness, with choosing to see. And if you visited Maple Ridge High today, you wouldn't find Ben's photo on a wall. You wouldn't find a statue or a plaque, but you'd find him, still sweeping, still watching, still holding the building steady, not with brute force, but with quiet dignity. And every student who passed him would know that man didn't just clean the floor. He raised the standard. He reminded them that courage isn't loud, it's constant. Sometimes, the most powerful people in our lives don't wear badges or speak loudly. They don't lead with commands, they lead with presence. Ben was never just a janitor. He was a guardian, a teacher, a mirror held up to our assumptions. This story asks a simple question. Who have you overlooked? In every school, every hospital, every train station, there are people holding the world together with silent discipline. They don't ask to be seen, but maybe it's time we start looking. If this story reminded you of someone who works in the background, who protects, serves, or simply shows up with integrity day after day, honor them now. Let their presence be recognized. Let their worth be spoken. Comment the word respect below, not just for Ben, but for every silent protector we've ever missed. Because true dignity isn't loud, it's lived, and the world runs on people like him.